And welcome to episode 35 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by my colleague, John. As always, good all. How are you doing today, John?
Oh, can't complain. Again, it's one of those funny ones, isn't it? You get into the tail end of summer, the weather just kind of takes a downturn, and then in great British tradition, all the DIY that you've been putting off all summer starts getting done.
Are you getting sad?
Well, I mean, sad
you've got a lamp for
as
that.
in sad lamp. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
not too bad.
If you're getting sad, just put the lamp on.
Yes. I'm just going to stare at it like this, and then I'll have no eyes, so I won't be able to see anything that's sad.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about John's mental health, as you
because there's none of it left.
If you've listened to the podcast before, you'll know that once a week I collate a list of AWS news, which I share in my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John and I select a subset of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about in a little bit more detail. So we have got a selection of articles this week. And if you read the newsletter, you'll know that last week was a big week for AI news. So there's been lots of buzz in the press about AI recently. And last week was a big week for AWS AI announcements. And the first one was, of course, Amazon Bedrock being made generally available. So it's come out of preview and it's now been made generally available, which means that quite a lot of improvements will have been made to Bedrock since it went into the preview or the beta service. But I suppose we should start. I don't think we've spoken a lot about Bedrock on the podcast. So perhaps let's start with the definition, John, of Bedrock, what it is, what it does, and then we can perhaps talk about a few of those improvements after it's gone into general availability.
That's what you build on top of, isn't it? The Bedrock, which is, I suppose, where the name comes from.
Absolutely, yes.
So, yeah, the idea behind Amazon Bedrock, not AWS Bedrock, Amazon Bedrock, because they're really inconsistent with the naming, it's a bugbear of mine, is they call it a foundation service. It will run, I think, 4 AI models, not all of them LLMs, but there'll be an LLM and there'll be images and this and that and the other, just kind of out of the box, which is great because much like AWS's other kind of managed AI services, so I'm thinking recognition primarily, not like your SageMaker, more of your, here's an API endpoint. It works very much like an API endpoint. Here's an endpoint, throw some stuff at it, give it some data, give it some settings, things like temperature, which in AI terms apparently is how creative you want the AI to be. I didn't know that. There we go. And it will spit some results out. Brilliant. You've used their foundation models. You've not had to train anything. You've not had to spend any GPU cycles or anything like that. And for reference, you use GPUs because it runs on ARM and they're faster. So we like that. And you've just got some really cool looking results. I saw a very limited preview of it. Literally, it was like 5 minutes at an AWS On Tour event, and it was only incredibly limited because that event was just before it went GA, and there's a few more On Tour events now, and it's after GA, so they'll go into a lot more detail, I imagine. So those of you in Milan, Lyon, or Barcelona, go and get to those events because you want to see this. You want to see this. Because from the 3 minutes I saw, I was quite impressed, even though they showed us functionally nothing. So yeah, that's Bedrock, AI as a service, baseline service. So they have models that they have pre-trained and run and all the rest of it. And then you can either just use those or build on top of them. And there'll be a marketplace as well for third-party models. So people like Anthropic, Hugging Face, which is the best name ever. Those sorts of people will be able to offer paid models as well as the ones that kind of come out of the box. Of course, the service isn't free. You are going to pay for it. I haven't looked at the pricing, but I can't imagine it's going to be horrifically expensive at low scale.
So it's AI via API.
Pretty
much, yeah. So what's changed then in the release to general availability?
We don't know because we didn't see the limited preview.
Oh, we do if we read the article, so I'll go through the things that changed. Caught you out there. It's usually you that catches me out. So a couple of extra models have been included. And I had that on my screen a moment ago and it's gone. But of course, in order for an AWS service to go into GA, it has to be enterprise ready. The article talks a little bit about how there's some compliance now wrapped around Bedrock. They've made it GDPR compliant. They've also integrated it with CloudWatch logging. So you can now log whatever you're doing with Bedrock into CloudWatch logging. There's a cost control element here, although again, we're not going to go into pricing, so I don't think either of us fully understand it. They have introduced the ability to use provisioned throughput on Bedrock. So rather than paying for exactly what you use, you can pay for some provisioned throughput up front, which is a common model in lots of other AWS services as well. Yeah, that's pretty much all I gleaned from the article about the changes that have been made to bring it into general availability. Anything else you wanted to add there, John?
I mean, those are kind of the things that you'd expect them to do, right? Budgets, cost control, logging. You kind of expect those as a day one service. And again, this is not the sort of service that you're going to need things like CloudFormation or Terraform support for, because it's an API primarily. That's the big part of it, is just interact with it. So it's kind of there, it's provisioned, you just sort of use it. I suppose the only other thing is this is one of the only services, certainly that I can remember, that's had such a lot of noise before it went GA. And obviously there was the appropriate amount of fanfare for it going into GA. But I don't know. I don't know if they tried to get it out before reInvent, because they were talking about doing it. They were talking about it back at like the summits and things. And it really felt like they were talking about Bedrock at the summits and before the summits as a way of controlling the narrative on GenAI and LLMs to an extent. So they kind of got it out a lot faster than they might have wanted to, because this certainly feels like a service that had ChatGPT and all the rest of it not gone completely mad, they'd have saved for reInvent.
Yeah. Well, it is AWS's big play in the space, and I think probably the reason it hasn't been saved for reInvent is just because there is so much noise in the press at the moment that AWS have to be seen to be making moves in the space, and reInvent is still a couple of months away, really. Mm-hmm. So that's a long time to wait if other people are stealing competitive advantage. So. But that's a nice segue into our second announcement this week about AWS and AI. And this one is about Amazon taking a $4 billion minority stake in AI safety research startup Anthropic. So, of course, Anthropic Claude is one of the models that's included with
Claude
Bedrock.
2 specifically.
Yep. Anthropic is obviously the organization that built the Claude model, and Amazon have taken a pretty hefty stake in the organization, much like Microsoft did with OpenAI. This seems to be the counter move from Amazon. So, what are your thoughts on this one?
It's a funny one, right? Because they've taken a minority stake for $4 billion, which is just a stupid amount of money. And then Anthropic, as part of that deal, appear to have said AWS are going to be Anthropic's primary cloud provider. So, left hand and right hand being very aware of what each other's doing. Brilliant. Okay, because AWS aren't going to take a stake in the company and say, yeah, go run it on Google or Microsoft or Alibaba or whoever. It's going to be run it on ours and we won't charge you so much money and kind of all that. Because fundamentally it works better for them like that, which is good. It does mention AWS Trainium for machine learning, which is I think it's specifically silicon for machine learning, if I remember rightly.
Yeah,
every time I see Trainium, I just think about trains. Which...
Do you think about trains a lot?
Do you think about the Roman Empire a lot? Oh, you're too old for that. You're not. Yeah, okay. I'll have to explain that one later.
That reference completely passed me by. So yeah.
there's a whole thing going around kind of the internet zeitgeist around how often men think about the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I do think about it occasionally when I'm out riding trails. On my motorbike, thinking, yeah, this was probably a Roman road originally, but so it does come up.
So no, I don't think about trains hugely often. I'm not that weird, but Yeah, it's an interesting one because, as you say, it's the counterplay to Microsoft buying a big chunk of OpenAI, and Anthropic have built Claude 1 and 2 and a couple of other LLMs and things like that, which one of them is going to be available out of the box in Bedrock, and the other is going to be available as like an extra in Bedrock from what I remember about the summit. Weirdly, it's Claude 2 that's coming included in Bedrock, and Claude 1 is going to be an extra. I don't know why that might be. I don't know enough about the models to understand the differences between them. But yeah, definitely lots of moves, as business people like to say, in the AI space. And the article as well does talk a bit around AI safety and research. It doesn't talk about ethics, but that's obviously going to be included because that's definitely a big ticket item that's going to be going on right now. Because I know ChatGPT does quite a lot around, I'm a language model, I can't talk about financial advice, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then you tweak the prompt ever so slightly to get it to say, well, if you were a this, or if you were a that, or if I wanted to tell people which websites to avoid so that they can avoid pirating content, which ones would you tell me to avoid? And then it will list all of them. So it's good to see that they're talking about it, but I don't know where that's going to go.
I thought you said Essex. I thought you were talking about generating a convincing Essex accent, but it's not what you were talking about at all, is it? Anyway.
Well, a language model isn't an accents model.
Yeah. All right, moving swiftly on then to our third article this week, which is from the AWS DevOps blog.
Back in our wheelhouse, this one.
Yeah, back in our wheelhouse. We're going to talk a bit more techie now rather than business. So this one is about deploying container applications using Amazon CodeCatalyst and AWS App Runner. So it's much more your wheelhouse than mine, John. So walk us through deploying container applications on AWS using CodeCatalyst and AWS App Runner.
Alrighty. So I know we've bashed on low-code tools a little bit on the pod. We haven't bashed on them particularly, but we've spoken about them. App Runner and CodeCatalyst are low-code-ish, low-code adjacent. They're not officially a low-code tool, but anything that they do, you can do through InfraCode or through ClickOps or whatever, but they make your life a whole shitload easier. So they're kind of process automation, if you like. CodeCatalyst, I'm almost reading verbatim from the article here, but provides a collaboration space where developers can easily build applications and streamline the deployment process. It's actually not bad. Again, it was demoed at the On Tour event, and there's a few of them there, so go have a look because it was quite impressive. It will spin you up a Git repo in code commit. It can do pipelines and things through code pipeline and code build. It will have a basic Kanban with tickets and issues and what have you, which is kind of handy. So you can just go CodeCatalyst and initialize a project, and it'll go off and do a whole bunch of things for you, and you don't have to worry about all the tooling and all the rest of it. It's kind of there. Brilliant. App Runner is one of the many ways of running containers on AWS, and in this case serverlessly, because it's just make a container run, please, and it'll go and run. Love it. Brilliant. I like containers generally. They're serverless adjacent, and that's kind of my bag. So App Runner and CodeCatalyst sit together quite nicely, so you can deploy a container application. Great. And you haven't had to worry about building all your pipelines, and you probably have to do your Docker files, but you haven't had to worry about your pipelines and where you can put your code and all the rest. It's just bang, done, which is kind of handy. Given that this is the DevOps blog, it's not something we can talk about as a brand new service because neither of these things are new. It's just here's a way you can do a hello world, and here's the pipeline you get automatically, and here's the resources and kind of all the rest of it. Definitely worth going and have a look at if you're not kind of really integrated into the ecosystem already. If you just want a way of running stuff, definitely worth looking at and giving this a read. Like I say, the on-tour event demoed CodeCatalyst, not App Runner, but I was incredibly impressed with it because the automated workflows are great out the box. There's drag and drop editing for the workflow, so you get a nice looking pipeline. It'll talk to code commit. I think it'll talk to GitHub as well, because everything seems to want to talk to GitHub, and GitLab gets no love anymore, which is sad, but that's the way of things. And then, push to ECR, and you can run things from ECR in App Runner, and it all kind of works. And everyone, goes home and tastes the rainbow because this is a Skittles advert.
Fair enough. So yeah, it is one of these walkthrough type blog posts. So if you do want to have a go at it, it will walk you through step by step deploying a sample application in AWS on containers using CodeCatalyst and AppRunner. So check out the article link in the show notes if you want to have a go at that yourself.
AppRunner is a funny one. I do want to just touch on this again. It's absolutely brilliant for getting going and getting running out the box and all the rest of it, and it will scale, but I would not recommend long-term production workload usage for it. I'd look at ECR, I'd look at EKS if you already run Kubernetes. If not, look at ECS, I should say, because that will handle auto-scaling a lot better. It will handle networking a lot better. It will handle multi-container services a lot better. And what I mean by multi-container services, you've got one container running a process, another one running logs, a third one deploying something somewhere else, and it'll handle that a lot better than AppRunner will. And I mean, all of these articles use a very basic hello world application. I wouldn't want to run a trading platform or a banking app off of AppRunner, but for your basic, I want to run this thing here, it's quite good for that.
So low traffic, low volume apps, maybe MVPs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it feels geared to that. Like most low-ish code services are quite good for good for MVPs and POCs and that kind of thing.
Getting the acronyms in today, getting heavy on the acronyms. It's been a while.
Tripping up on the acronyms.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on from AppRunner and let's talk about training. So our next article is from the, not trains, John, don't get too excited, training.
Not trainium.
No, training with a G on the end. So our next article is from the AWS Training and Certification blog, and it's called Conquering a Mountain, 5 Tips to Pass AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional, which, of course, I did. I wore this T-shirt especially. For
the listeners that aren't watching the video, he's wearing his AWS certified T-shirt, which he spent an embarrassing amount of money to get shipped from America because they don't ship to the UK by default.
Yeah, I don't know why the AWS certified store will only ship to the US.
You can't even find it anymore if you're not.
No, I think it's gone. I think it's gone. Actually, I don't know if they've just hidden it behind some geo filtering, but it doesn't even show up in the AWS certified benefits section anymore. So maybe it's no longer a thing. But actually, the fulfillment company that sent out my lovely AWS certified polo shirt is the same fulfillment company that sends out all the other AWS swag globally. So I don't know why they never figured out how to send this stuff globally. But anyway, we're not really here to talk about the cost. But yeah, but you had to buy the shipping. This wasn't free. Whereas all the other stuff you don't actually pay for, AWS pay for it. So, community builder swag and UG leader swag, etc. They pay the shipping on that. Whereas this stuff, you're actually buying it yourself.
So Carl spent an embarrassing amount of money to get a T-shirt.
It's a nice T-shirt though. Yeah, it's a nice polo shirt. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the swag side of it. We're here to talk about tips to pass AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional. It's a little bit cheesy, this article, because it's using a mountain climbing analogy to how to prepare for your AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional exam. But some people like analogies. In fact, I do use analogies. I was using a mountain climbing analogy
I'm
earlier
allergic
today
to
myself
mountains,
to explain
definitely.
But the article obviously goes on to give you 5 tips to passing the Solutions Architect Professional exam. And of course, it is on the AWS blog. So a lot of it is use all the AWS stuff, which of course, a lot of the AWS stuff is good and is free, but it's not the only way to go about preparing for your AWS Certified Solutions Architect Professional exam. But let's take a look at the tips that are in the article, and then let's see if I can add some more to that. First place to start is the Solutions Architect Professional Exam Guide. So I would definitely recommend whatever exam you are studying for, read the exam guide. It's pretty short, pretty easy read, but it tells you what to expect, how the exam is scored, and that kind of thing.
That's absolutely key, because I took a number of AWS exams. I've not done this one, but I've done the other Pro one and a number of associates. One of the things I didn't realize is not every question is scored. So,
but you don't know which ones are not.
No, admittedly, but somehow it made me feel a lot better about it.
Yeah. Yeah. If you really mess that one up, maybe it's going to be one of the ones that isn't scored. But yeah, definitely the exam place is the exam guide is a great place to start. Then it goes on to talk about gearing up for success with the proper equipment and suggests that you leverage AWS Skill Builder, which can be done for free. So there is some free training on the Skills Builder. There's 600 plus free on-demand courses with exam prep, learning plans, and digital badges. We've spoken about digital badges, not badgers, before on the podcast. But in this article, this is where I started to take a little bit of kind of like, it's a bit of an AWS sales pitch, because it says become a Skills Builder subscriber, which I think is $30 a month, which doesn't sound like a lot, but a bit like a gym membership. If you stop using it, then you're going to be paying $30 a month for nothing. So if you're going to use Skills Builder and you switch that on, then remember to switch it off when you stop using it, because otherwise, that's $360 a year that's going to be going off your credit card, which is very easy to forget about and build up into quite a significant amount. But, there's some good stuff on there. I didn't realize there is now an AWS Cloud Quest Solutions Architect role-playing game. So that's obviously moved on from the just the cloud practitioner. And then, of course, there's other things like the Builder Labs. So one great way to cement learning is to actually do things in labs rather than just listening to death by PowerPoint over and over again. Get your hands dirty, get involved in some labs, build things, destroy them, build them again until you know how to do it.
And that's absolutely key as well. If it's not your day job, right? I don't do huge amounts of labs for training, but I do this every day. I work with cloud resources. Hence, when I was doing the DevOps one, it was kind of, I reckon I can cheese it and just kind of do the training to bridge the gaps on things that I don't use, because no one uses Chef, so who uses OpsWorks? But like, who uses Chef anymore, really? But that's by the by. 90% of what's in that exam I do on a daily basis, so I didn't need the labs. But if you're less of a technical person, you're more sales aligned or whatever, then it's definitely worth making sure you do those as well.
Yeah, the labs are absolutely great for me, because I'm not using AWS day in, day out, because I'm more on the commercial side of the business. So yeah, they were really helped to cement my learning. And then, of course, other things in Skill Builder, you've got AWS Jam journeys and official practice exams. But we'll talk a little bit more about practice exams in a minute. So the third tip is about exam prep enhanced course, AWS Solutions Architect Professional. So that's a specific AWS delivered course, which includes everything that the standard version does. Takes things further by incorporating hands-on practice, which we've just been talking about. And of course, you don't have to just use the training materials. You can go and read all of the AWS documentation and white papers about the services. The AWS documentation is excellent, and it's a great place to learn what's going on inside those services. The fourth tip was about exam rehearsal. So I mentioned that there are practice exams available within Skills Builder, but there are also other places outside of AWS that you can get practice exams, places like Whiz Labs and Tutorials Dojo that I've used.
They're less accurate than they used to be, I think, but they're still definitely worth doing.
The external ones. Yeah. One thing I would say about practice exams is I have passed AWS Solutions Architect Professional as well as Associate. Never passed a Solutions Architect Professional practice exam before taking the actual exam. So don't be discouraged. But certainly if you can pass a practice exam, then you shouldn't have a problem with the real thing. But I never managed to pass a practice exam. I'd booked the exam. I'd deferred it twice. I was going to lose out on my exam voucher. So I went and sat it and I passed. Woohoo! Rehearsal definitely helps. And then the final tip is just about collaborating and networking, getting involved in the community. So obviously, John and I are part of the AWS Community Builders program. We also run an AWS user group in Brighton in the UK. So there are people that you can speak with and events that you can go to learn more about AWS, either just through speaking with other people, other builders who are building on AWS, or by listening to talks, or by actually getting involved in the community yourself, writing blog posts, producing YouTube videos, etc., about your learning.
Being a guest on this podcast.
Being a guest on the podcast is always a great place to start. We've launched many a community builder career, advance them onto the hero program by coming on the podcast. Great opportunities to get out there and collaborate. Doesn't cost anything other than your time. Those are the tips in the article. I think I did kind of interweave some of my own tips, but
Yeah.
there are external
definitely-
courses that you can get from Udemy. With or a Cloud Guru. So I've used Cloud Guru training before. I've used Udemy training before. So shop around and just find what works for you, because sometimes it's about the instructor. Sometimes about the way the content is delivered. No one course is necessarily going to work for every individual. So find a course, find an instructor that works for you, is what I would suggest.
It's worth saying as well that all of these tips that we've given here and in the article apply to kind of every exam, in AWS at least. I particularly like the tagline for the first one, building cognitive stamina, because when I did the DevOps Pro one, that was the biggest issue I found. It wasn't the content, it wasn't my knowledge, it was just how long you're in an exam room for and how much you have to concentrate. Because like anything else, the brain is a muscle. It's not a muscle, it's a brain, but you have to train your concentration. So that's definitely something to be aware of.
Absolutely. And what we kind of glossed over in that first tip was about scheduling study time, sticking to it, just getting into the routine of taking time out each day, whatever time of day works best for you for learning, but set the time aside and stick to the sessions and just get into that process of learning to get your brain in gear. So on to our final article of this week, and this one is about new courses and certification updates of AWS Training and Certification in September 23. And I did read this article yesterday, and there are loads, so we can't go through them all. But it's fantastic to see how much new stuff there actually is in AWS Training and Certification. But maybe let's just pick on some highlights. So is there anything that jumped out for you, John?
There's a new associate exam that's just come out into beta, Data Engineer, which I thought was cool, because big data is a specialty, and now there's an associate level one, and there hasn't been a new associate exam, I think, ever since like the original 3. So that's quite interesting.
So that gold jacket has just become harder to obtain. So 14 exam or 13 is it now? You got to do it was 12
yeah
before, wasn't it?
The gold jacket is incredibly hard to get hold of anyway, because you have to work for either a particular type of AWS partner or AWS themselves, and then if you don't work for AWS, you have to be an ambassador, which means you have to hold 2 pro certs, but you have to hold all the certs anyway, and then you have to go to the ambassador summit and actively hold all the certs at the same time. So it's just one extra exam doesn't make that much harder, because quite frankly the exams aren't the hard bit, I think, of that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Nice to see a new associate exam, because the only way previously to kind of demonstrate competence in the data space was to go and do a big data specialty exam, and specialty exams are on the same tier as pro exams. They're hard, and I'm not saying that this isn't hard, because data is tricky, but it's nice to see a lower level exam coming into the sphere.
Yep. Lots of new labs, I noticed. So we were talking about labs last week when we were talking about practical things we can do in our user group. New AI lab, building a question answering bot using generative AI, of course, very topical for what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. But some other ones as well, EC2 instance right sizing lab, becoming a 10x developer using Code Whisperer, so how to accelerate your development using...
I hate
10x.
That term. Yeah, I'm a 10x developer. You're a moron. No.
It has been kind of overused in marketing circles. 10x your business, 10x your development, 10x your learning. Yeah, it has been a kind of
the
done
worst
to death,
one is whenever
really,
you see it on a recruitment ad or whatever. We only employ 10x developers. So what? You only employ people that are so far up their own orifices that they can see out their own mouths. Cool, excellent. I'll be a 1x dev any day of the week. Thanks.
Fair enough. So what else have we got on here?
I worked very hard not to swear in that. I worked very hard.
I know you did. Yeah, that's why I'm trying to move on before you do. We've got some more free training on Skill Builder. So some of it industry specific. There's a new course on deploying applications with Beanstalk, how to automate EC2 infrastructure, getting started with Inspector. So loads of good stuff there. If you want to read about everything new in the world of AWS Training and Certification in September 2023, then check out the link in the show notes for that article. But I think we've picked out the highlights there, which brings us neatly to the end of our time this week for season 2, episode 35 of Logicast. So well done, John, for getting through that 30 minutes without swearing, especially as you're suffering from seasonal affective disorder. But at least you have the cure on your desk. So
No, I have the cure on the bench behind me.
Yes. Well, you can go and yes, I'm not going to say what I was going to say, but as I say, that brings us neatly to the end of our time for this week. Yeah, we'll leave that to your imagination. So thank you for listening. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy us, let us know.
Tell your friends anyway, but lie to them.
Yeah. You can download us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see us while you're listening to us, we are live on YouTube, and we also distribute the podcast via videos. So check us out, like, subscribe. We'll see you again next time with another episode of Logicast. Thanks for listening.